The laughter hit her like a punch. It wasn't loud at first, just a few sharp jokes, tossed like stones by men who believed she didn't belong. She stood at the far end of the indoor gun range, her hands steady on the rifle, her jaw tight, her breath slow. The paper targets fluttered in the air like thin, trembling leaves. And every time she pulled the trigger, the sound echoed off the walls as if the room itself was mocking her. They called her names. They questioned her strength. They said she was too soft for this place. She didn't respond, because she had learned something the hard way. When people underestimate you, the best revenge is silence. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're re-watching from. I love knowing who's listening. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, unflattering glow over the men clustered behind her. Their laughter felt like heat, like the kind that makes you sweat even when the air is cold. She could hear the faint metallic click of magazines being loaded, the rustle of targets being changed, and the low murmur of voices that believed they were safe in their superiority. Her name was Lena. She was a veteran. But nobody at the range knew that. To them, she was just another woman trying to prove she could handle a gun. To her, it was another day in a world that had once tried to break her. She remembered the battlefield like it was yesterday, the dust, the smell of sweat and blood, the silence before a shot. She remembered the day she promised herself she would never be helpless again. That promise had driven her to train harder, to become the kind of shooter who could be relied on when the world was falling apart. Now, she stood among men who had never faced real danger, and they were laughing at her. The laughter grew louder as she took aim. One of the men stepped forward, his grin wide and cruel. "Come on," he sneered. "Show us what you've got, princess." Lena didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She simply adjusted her stance, feeling the weight of the rifle settle into her shoulder like a familiar friend. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the memories pass through her like a shadow. She could feel her brother's hand on her shoulder, his voice in her ear, telling her to stay calm. She could feel the promise she'd made, the one she'd never broken. She opened her eyes and fired. The first bullet hit the target dead center. The men stopped laughing. The second bullet tore through the bullseye with the same quiet certainty. The third bullet followed, as if the rifle itself was speaking. The room went still. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of recognition. The men stared, mouths slightly open, as if they couldn't accept what they were seeing. The air seemed to tighten around them, heavy with the sudden shift in power. Lena didn't smile. She didn't look triumphant. She simply continued shooting, each bullet a calm statement that she belonged here. One of the men, bigger than the rest, with a face that looked like it had never been told no, stepped closer. His voice shook slightly as he tried to regain control. "Okay," he said, "not bad. For a girl." Lena turned her head slowly. The gunmetal in her eyes did not soften. "Not bad," she replied, "for someone who has seen real war." A hush fell over the range. The men exchanged glances, suddenly unsure. The one who had mocked her shifted uncomfortably, like a man realizing he had stepped into something he couldn't dominate. Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn patch. The fabric was frayed, but the emblem was unmistakable, a symbol of elite service, the kind that wasn't given to everyone. She held it up for everyone to see. The men's faces changed. Some went pale, others looked away, unable to face the truth. The room seemed to tilt, as if the world had suddenly become unsteady, because the patch was not hers, belonged to her brother. The man who had laughed the loudest swallowed hard, his pride finally slipping away. His voice was small when he spoke again. Who are you?" Lena's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of everything she had endured. "I'm the one who survived," she said. "I'm the one who learned what it means to be underestimated." The silence deepened. The men had no words. Their mockery had dissolved into something they hadn't expected: respect. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that grows slowly, like a seed in the dark. Lena lowered the patch and turned to leave. But before she stepped away, she glanced back at the men. She didn't demand their apology. She didn't ask for their approval. She simply said, "You can laugh all you want. But never forget, strength isn't always loud." She walked out into the sunlight. The world outside suddenly brighter, as if the air itself had been cleansed. The range behind her remained quiet, the echoes of the gunshots fading like distant thunder. And somewhere inside the men who had mocked her, a new kind of understanding began to take root. Because they had learned something they never expected to learn from a woman they thought was weak. That true power doesn't need to shout. It simply proves itself. Because courage isn't measured by who can be the loudest. It's measured by who can remain calm when the world is trying to break them. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything. If this story moved you, hit like, comment, and subscribe to Whispered Words for more real mission stories. Because strength doesn't ask for permission, it quietly earns it.